Hey guys, it's Emily, the controversial mom, and as always, I have a hot topic for us to discuss. I've been doing a lot of research recently on Planned Parenthood, specifically why it is that Trump has been pulling back their money. So I assumed, probably like most people, that Trump was just pro-choice, and because he is pro-choice, he did not believe that abortion should be taxpayer funded for just anybody and everybody, and therefore he was freezing the money. That's not entirely accurate. Now, it could be true in the long term, but for right now, the moment that we're in, that's actually not the reason that he's done it. So Trump has been freezing funding, specifically its Title X money, to healthcare clinics across the country. Now, Title X money is kind of an interesting little color of money because of what it does. It truly exists to provide comprehensive, and focus on the word comprehensive, it is to provide comprehensive healthcare services to low-income families. So it truly is to help people that are in need. At least that's what it was originally created for, I should say. So we live in Alabama. There's a lot of rural communities in our areas. I grew up in a very rural community. So Title X funding has a really good function and purpose in those situations where you've got a lot of people that do live in more poverty-stricken, low-income areas that maybe they can't afford health insurance, or maybe they just don't have the job base around them to be able to afford to get health care or insurance. So there's a lot of good aspects to Title X. There really is. I don't think we need to cut Title X, just for everybody's own awareness. I do support having Title X funding. But why Trump cut Title X funding specifically to these areas, and he's cut it to like 9 different Planned Parenthood affiliates across the country. I think all in all, I read that they've cut nearly $30 million of funding within the HHS, Health and Human Services Department, that went to these type of organizations that does comprehensive health care. And by comprehensive, it's including abortions. But like I said, they've cut funding to about 9 different Planned Parenthood affiliates across the country. And they've specifically targeted these organizations. And it's not just Planned Parenthood. There's also a couple of the more like local companies or organizations that also have had their money frozen. But it's all because of, I'll call it their mission statement. I don't know that it's technically the mission statement, but it's definitely their objective, their target audience, whatever you want to call it. Because their mission, their target audience specifically states that they are focused on Black communities and illegal immigrants. So somewhere in the verbiage, it talks about minorities or communities of minority communities and illegal immigrant status. So why that's an issue is because it violates the Civil Rights Act. So the Civil Rights Act, for anybody that doesn't remember or hasn't heard me ranting and raving about it recently, the Civil Rights Act basically says you cannot discriminate against someone based on their race, their color, their national origin, any of the things, right? So basically what's happening is these 9 affiliates of Planned Parenthood have stated their focus is on Black communities. Well, that's discrimination based on race. So it's not to say that they wouldn't perform an abortion on someone that was white or Indian, Asian, whatever it may be. It's not saying that they wouldn't provide those services. It's simply saying that's not who they focus on. They focus on one community based purely on their immigration status and their race. That is pure discrimination, and it is in direct violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, mind you. This thing's been around for generations. Yet we have organizations that exist with missions that are in direct violation of this act. So that's essentially why Trump has frozen the money. He's frozen the money. He hasn't fully cut the funding yet. He's just frozen it and told these organizations, you need to reassess how you're providing services. And if they get in line with it and they remove these references to discrimination, then potentially they get their money back. From what I can remember of the things I read, I think it was like a 30-day freeze. It wasn't a 6-month thing. Like it was relatively quick turn that they could get their funding back. But that's where we are in the moment. That's why the money to Planned Parenthood is currently temporarily frozen, is because of violations of the Civil Rights Act based on race discrimination. Now, I've read a lot, I think we've all heard a lot, that Trump plans to just fully cut funding to Planned Parenthood because they provide abortions, and he doesn't feel that taxpayers should have to pay for that. Now, I hope that's the direction that things go, and I hope that he fully cuts it and not just temporarily freezes it. I hope that that is the route we go. I am very much pro-life. I think that life is precious, that it is created by God. We need to protect it at all costs. So I truly hope that is the direction that we go, but time will only tell. Now, we don't have Planned Parenthood here in Alabama. Most of us know that abortions are illegal in the state of Alabama. To an extent, like, we can start getting into the gray of an abortion yourself or a medically provided abortion. Starts getting really dicey when we get into that. So I'm not doing it. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. I will just say it is illegal to have a medical provided abortion in the state of Alabama. You cannot go to a doctor and say, I want an abortion, and the doctor provide it for you. Illegal. The doctor can go to jail and lose their license. So why am I talking about CDC or the Planned Parenthood when abortion is illegal in Alabama? And the only Planned Parenthood facility, at least in Huntsville, is closed. If you go to their website, it says temporarily closed, but it directs you where you can go in another state to get an abortion. I am talking about it for a couple of reasons. Even though Planned Parenthood does not have a facility in Alabama to get an abortion, they are still present in Alabama, and in a way that is probably to some extent much more concerning to the everyday parent. So Planned Parenthood does this really crazy thing called comprehensive sex ed. They create curriculum for schools to use to talk about sex in a very comprehensive manner. What does that mean? It is the most disgusting thing imaginable. So I'm telling you now, if there are kids around, you need to send them in another room, because this is definitely not age appropriate. Comprehensive sex ed is exactly that. It teaches sex education in a very comprehensive and wide lens. It means teaching children about dental dams, about multiple forms of contraceptives, multiple ways to have sex. Now, when I was a kid and I had sex ed, it was extremely awkward for everybody in the room because, we were teenage kids acting like idiots. But we were taught abstinence is not having sex. Waiting till you're married. Waiting till you're in a committed relationship. Waiting till you're mentally, emotionally, physically ready to have that level of commitment. It meant not having sex. In the world of Planned Parenthood, abstinence means having sex without the threat of pregnancy. So what does that mean exactly? It means encouraging children to have anal sex and oral sex. Very, very dangerous ways to spread STDs, mind you. But that's what it means. It means having sex as long as you use a contraceptive, use a condom, use birth control, get Plan B, have an abortion. That is the version of abstinence in the world of Planned Parenthood. Now, sex ed is not a required course when you're in high school. It's an elective. Thank God it's an elective. But there are schools in the state of Alabama that teach comprehensive sex ed. There's another way to teach sex ed, and it's called sex risk avoidance. That's what traditionally people my age had when we were in school. It's abstinence means not having sex. But very few schools are using that type of sex ed. The majority of them are using Planned Parenthood comprehensive sex ed because it's free. There's a lot of it. It's easily available. They've got videos you can watch. Go on YouTube and type in Planned Parenthood sex ed, and you will be appalled at the videos you find. They're disgusting. It's basically a how-to guide to masturbate. I mean, it's insane what Planned Parenthood puts out there. So cutting funding to Planned Parenthood is more than just cutting abortions. It's preventing them really and truly from developing this type of content and putting it into public schools. Again, that would be like a long-term benefit, is that we just completely remove their funding and then they can't develop this nonsense. But that's on the horizon of what we could potentially gain as a community, as a society, of getting back to some level of normalcy if we can cut funding to Planned Parenthood. The other outrageous thing that I learned, and it is a mind-blowing at what they're doing with Planned Parenthood funding. So we talked a lot about libraries and what's going on in our public libraries. Federal funding is potentially being cut. In the state of Alabama, state funding is being cut. If libraries are pushing this radical, disgusting sexualization of children and gender ideology, like all the craziness, libraries are now forced to either comply with state and federal directives or lose state and federal funding. So, of course, libraries are going to do what they have to do to survive, and they're going to start looking for alternative sources of funding. Well, in California, they've turned to Planned Parenthood to provide resources to them. So in several libraries in Sacramento, California, I think they have 28 total libraries, and 12 of them, they have basically what I call a sex ed locker. And it is actually a locker, and it is the most horrific thing. It's available for any user of the library. So if it's a 5-year-old that stumbles upon the locker, or if it's an 18-year-old that intentionally goes in there to get stuff from the locker, it has sex ed material, very graphic, almost how-to guides within the locker, contraceptives, could be condoms, dental dams, lubricants, anything you can imagine, sex toys, all sorts of things in this locker, all provided by Planned Parenthood. Now, I get it. We're not in California. We're nowhere near being California, except for the fact that people are fleeing California in droves because of how radical it is. And I'm not convinced that the people fleeing from California or New York or Washington State are necessarily changing their voting habits when they come to Alabama. I hope and pray they are. We really need to engage with those people to make sure that they understand the importance of that. But nonetheless, we're not in California, but it doesn't mean that Alabama can't quickly become California. If you've not followed the library situation closely, you really need to take a minute and kind of get caught up on it. They're potentially losing federal funding and state funding. They have fought back so hard on removing these very graphic books out of the children's section. The fight hasn't been to remove them from the library. The fight has simply been not in the kids section, put it in the adult section, and the adult in the conversation can decide whether or not the child gets the book. It's really a practical solution, but there's been immense pushback on this. So if they're pushing back on the state and the federal government funding the library and then dictating the placement of a book, it's going to be really difficult when Planned Parenthood is funding these lockers, because it's not state funded, it's not federal funded. How does the state or the federal government dictate that locker can't be in the library? And as more and more funding gets cut, libraries and any organization is going to start looking for funding in other places, and you've got Planned Parenthood standing there with boatloads of cash ready to put into the library. So while you may not be in a position where Planned Parenthood affects you on a day-to-day life in terms of abortions or their services, it doesn't mean that you're not affected by Planned Parenthood or that you and your family can't potentially be impacted by them. So the Planned Parenthood thing is definitely one to keep your eyes on in what comes next. Is Trump really going to cut full funding to Planned Parenthood because he doesn't believe in taxpayer-funded abortions? I surely hope so, but time will tell. Not a lot we can do on that front right now other than just sit and wait. But in terms of all the other things Planned Parenthood does, their presence in your community, in your local libraries, and in your local schools, there's a lot you can be doing there. Start asking questions. Find out what's going on in your kid's school. What type of curriculum are they using? What is it based upon? You really need to know that, because they've got a lot more influence on younger children than we give them credit for. So really engage on this. Figure out what's happening. Figure out what your libraries are doing. Are they looking to take funding from Planned Parenthood? And if so, we got to figure out how to stop that, because that's extremely dangerous. So definitely keep the Planned Parenthood thing in the front of your mind. There's a lot going on there, and I don't think that this conversation is going to die down anytime soon. If anything, it's probably going to escalate and really become a hot topic over the summer, especially going into my favorite month. We're taking over the month of June, and it's no longer going to be Pride Month. It's going to be Humility Month. So keep that in mind as we head into the summer and ways that we can combat this craziness with Planned Parenthood and truly take back and make that Humility Month and teach kids to be humble and not proud of all the craziness that's going on in our societies. So stay aware of the Planned Parenthood conversation. There's going to be a lot going on with it, and we're still going to have a whole lot of work to do there. Thanks for joining, guys. We'll see you next week.